Is it in the keys? The fingertips that reach out to touch them? The string that begs to be bent? Or is it in the notes on a page? A foot to a pedal? The infinite space between imagination and skill? Or is it simply music?
Well, hello and welcome to the 13th Note podcast, The Art of Mastery. I am your host, Chef Spike Wong. And today we're doing something very unique, very special. We're not having a special guest to learn about their mastery. I am going to talk about the topic of mastery on refinement. Now, what is that about? Refinement. I often tell people, especially parents who's getting their kids involved into playing sports or getting involved playing in music, those type of things that requires practice, that requires definitely dedication and commitment to it. With that, a lot of times the parents just don't enforce it and let it run its course. And then, oh, well, you're not interested and that's all right. We'll try something else. What becomes that is that it ultimately becomes strings of dipping your toes into the pool and then never going swimming, never learning to swim. But I got my toe wet, so I didn't like it. So I'm going to move on. And ultimately, after a few tries here and there, things got busy. Oh, here comes school. Here comes friends and social circles. Pretty soon, I'm out of high school. I guess I'll go to college. Well, got to earn enough money to pay back the student loan. And then fell in love. I'm on my way to get married and have a family. And I got a job. I'm paying all these bills. And I have nothing that I put my passion or heart to. This is a story that I've heard many times, and this is the type of situation that I would definitely want everyone to pay attention to what your inner self is telling you when you get to do something that may be hard, that may be laborious in the sense of that you're not going to get anything done within the next 6 months, the next 6 years. Depends on how big this passion could be. One of the things that I've learned when I was in the instrument manufacturing and instrument sales, and we're talking about music instruments, that we have this greatness of history and a heritage of just incredible periods of humanity that is expressed through certain music, certain arts, and used with certain instruments. So with those things being the, I guess, cornerstone, the influence, the inspiration that paints for the new generation to take over, I find it to be very disappointing that we're not bringing out more talents and more artists, more musicians, more creative thoughts and creative minds in our society today. A lot of people will blame all this from, devices, technology, interactions with the iPhone, the iPad, the video gaming consoles, the things that kind of take away from any kind of aspiration to use that time in sense of honing in a skill. You're taking that and honing in the skill to where a video game that most likely is not going to be a career move. But not saying that it isn't, because I do know people who's in the video gaming business that is not only designers, testers, but composers. So it can be a career path depending on how you put yourself in the place to refine your path in your skills, your techniques toward that business. Here's the thing that really is misunderstood about refinement once you get involved into something that requires it. And I'll give you my personal history and example so that way it's easier for me to tell the story and for you to relate to it. I came from, of course, a different country, but by age 12 to 13, I was here in America desperately looking for ways to fit in. So I got involved playing sports, especially baseball. And I was okay, but I had no formal training on that. So I play along with the kids and just went on the sheer will of reading books and practicing against the fence, things like that as a kid. I didn't have anybody in the family that was going to practice with me. So I had to basically find the time, find the place, and find a certain regiment to develop this. So what I did is I got a rubber baseball opposed to a so-called leather-covered baseball. A rubber-covered baseball was easier to throw against a brick wall without, damaging the ball. And I marked off across the yard. It's not really the true distance up from a pitching mound to the home plate, but because it went into my neighbor's side yard, there was a slope, and that slope acted as a pitcher's mound for me. And I would go outside, and I did this for years. We're talking about from probably age 11, 12 to about 15 to 16 that I would throw against the wall. I would throw with windup. I would try different grips. I would refine what I thought I was reading and try to interpret what I was reading to what I was seeing on television with the Major League Pro ball players. And slowly but surely, I did get chances to pitch in Little League. My Little League pitching debut was horrible. It came from a day that nobody told me that I was going in, and out of nowhere, the coach decided, go warm up. Warm up for what? Well, you're going in to pitch. So I had a good, about cozy 5 minutes notice before I walked in there and go throw in a competitive game. Needless to say, I walked a lot of people and got yanked out after 2 outs, but I did strike out a guy. So the idea behind going up there and doing it didn't bring any kind of fear or lack of confidence. And the reason behind it is because I worked at this. I just didn't work at it in a proper distance. Didn't have anybody giving me any feedback, but I went out there with enough confidence and enough hours logged in my front yard that I didn't feel that I didn't belong. What I felt after I came off was, dang, I didn't have enough time to kind of fine tune what I was missing up on. Now, that seems amusing in a lot of ways, just due to the fact that that was my very first time ever taking a pitcher's mound and pitching in a game without really having any kind of practice or rehearse that in my mind or any of that. I think I threw a batting practice a season prior in Little League. That's about the extent of my pitching. So with that, I'll move up to now in current times. In the last 2.5 years, I've been playing baseball, very competitive in some stints, but I went and got a pitching coach and worked on pitching in a tunnel in a facility. And I went out there and pitched in real game time. And it was okay to some degree, and it was horrible in other degrees. And it's because there was not enough hours logged into refining what I was discovering, how I was, making amends to things that did not work, the things did work, and how to keep the things uniform in a way that I can process it in my thought. And not only that, the consistency, what I was seeking for, that to me needed to be there. And because of not having a regular rotation workout, in other words, I'm not a major league pitcher. I don't pitch every 4 days. I don't have, the kind of regimen. It's just that I'm not a professional. But at the same time, when you go and play competitive baseball, the first thing everybody wants you to do is to perform at the level that you see on television, which is not realistic in a lot of ways. But in some ways, it can be done now. So I never turn down an opportunity. I go into it with full confidence. And with the amount of time that I put into it, it helped me to understand how I'm failing at certain things and how I'm succeeding at certain things. This is the fine, so-called the line and the focus toward refinement is being able to recognize the failures and the crashes when you're out there doing the task or working and refining the technique. In this case, in pitching, the last event that I've done, in sense of practicing and pitching tunnel, I had a great epiphany because I started to really put on the analytical hat of saying, how come this isn't working? Because I'm stepping too much this direction. If my arm is releasing too late, this is causing it to go left. If I change my position on the rubber on the mound, would that assist in sense of the path of the ball being in the strike zone? Then ultimately, I recognized that there was a pitching delivery style that I remember mimicking back in the junior high and elementary days. And this is emulating the pitcher from Baltimore Orioles, Jim Palmer. Jim Palmer had a real high leg kick, and then he would wind up and basically almost expose his entire chest forward in as a whipping motion. And I felt that was really odd. I remember this as a kid doing it in my front yard, emulating that move and not really able to look at the catcher on a certain point. But the ball always went straight, and it was always hitting my target. So the lack of confidence from the point of, I'm taking my eye off the catcher. How can I stay on that? Was above my so-called aptitude at 7th grade. But it isn't above my aptitude here now at 61 years old. So needless to say, as I was keep on throwing ball on the low outside at this practice this past week, I decided to try the Jim Palmer delivery style, his technique, by rearing back and exposing the chest while I whip across and arching my back a little bit differently than I normally do. And lo and behold, 60 feet, 6 inches, fastball down the pipe, very accurate. So, of course, the thought that comes to my mind next is, can I reproduce this over and over and over? And the answer was yes. Oh, okay. Now, how can I do this and still keep my head straight and looking at the catcher? And this is the part of the refinement, the maturity, the aptitude came in. I was able to make these little minor adjustments that I didn't understand at all at 7th grade that I do know now, that I was able to refine to look at my target, keep this posture, keep this technique, and throw strikes. So needless to say, my confidence is up about 1,000% after this session. Now I can't wait to go into a game situation and really try to use it. Along with this, I also signed up for Joe Zeller's Knuckleball Academy, Pitching Academy. Okay, and Joe was a guest of mine on the 13th Note podcast Art of Mastery. You can find that on the Rumble channel. So come back and, look at the Rumble channel and find Joe Zeller. He has some great insights regards to how to get your kids involved playing ball and how to really train your arm, not hurt yourself, and those type of things. So I hired and joined him, his academy, with the stipulation. I told him, I'm not a kid in school. I'm not a guy that's trying to get signed or any of this. So therefore, my attention from you is not nearly the same as, let's say, a kid who's going into, JC next year or going to D1 next year, and you really need to refine his pitching. He was good with that. So we have a great understanding. He taught me how to throw the knuckleball pretty darn good. I just could not get the ball to do what I wanted to do at 60 feet. And when I threw it in a game, it was just horrible. Couldn't control it really what I wanted. So I went back. After I broke my hand last season, I had a lot of time off, sit down and study and figure out, do I want to play baseball anymore, or do I want to refine and keep training, get back to that level. And the level I was playing at, people were throwing 85, 95 miles per hour fastballs. So it wasn't anything that was sneezing at. There was kids that was coming up from Dominican Republic that was hoping to catch on to some kind of minor league systems or some kind of contract and pro ball systems here in America. So we were playing against some decent talents at this point. And it really taught me a lot. It taught me on the level of preparation, taught me on the level of focus, intent. And I got involved with, of course, my wife, Kat. She does heart space hypnosis. I had a sports hypnosis package custom done for me that I listen to every day to stay focused on the diamond. And it's incredible. When I go out there, when I'm at bat, I have no chatter in my head whatsoever. This is how well my mind has been fine-tuned. So with pitching the knuckleball, not to my expectations, I had to, kind of just abandon that at the game. And I was horrible that game. But I did come away with one thing. My two-seam fastball seems to work because people were swinging at it. They were either missing it or fouling it off. Nobody got a hit off the two-seam fastball. Everything was a curveball or some kind of a changeup that just didn't, give enough going down to the plate that was hit into the field. So that was something that was a good takeaway. And without that takeaway, I would have never really thought about how to refine this level of knuckleball. Again, this is entirely what is the episode talking about. Refinement is to teach you to understand that refinement is not overnight. Refinement is not an instantaneous thing. Refinement is the long lifetime commitment. As long as you're involved, you are refining constantly. Even the greatest of the greats are refining consistently. Nolan Ryan refined his pitching with Tom House after 35 into his 40s. He threw better in his 40s and sense of technique than he did when he was in his 20s, in his early 30s. So refinement for me on this aspect of it, is one of the key factors that never give up, because you realize, okay, I just need to reevaluate, look at what's going on and how am I actually getting my results. In the tunnel, I threw that Jim Palmer technique and it worked for the fastball. However, I can't throw that with the knuckleball because the knuckleball needs to leave your hand entirely different. And I went through so many knuckleballers videos, including everybody in the Joe Zeller Academy. And I watched everybody's delivery. And ultimately, I came up with a delivery that was very close to R.A. Dickey's style. And a little bit of Phil Necro as well. It's a little bit less power coming out of my body, more coming out of the slinging of my arm, like throwing an airplane, a paper airplane. And I threw a couple of them that made the 60 feet distance pretty well. So that was encouraging. Then the next session of balls, and I threw them in a rotation about 40 pitches at a time, then to take a few minute break. Then the second session of 40, I threw, it became much more accurate. It became more apparent that I can hit the plate, hit the catcher, and get it to where it needs to be. So that's encouraging. By the third session of 40 pitches, I realized, okay, now I have done enough throwing in this technique that I can try to throw this and see what it will do according to the knuckleball personality, which is unpredictability. It could drop, it could go fluttering, it could spin sideways, it could do all kind of crazy stuff. And I realize now I'm throwing stuff that's reaching the plate and it's dying, literally dropping at the plate. And this is very exciting to me because all of a sudden I'm throwing things that as a hitter, you would stand there in the home plate looking at the pitch coming out of my hand. And within less than a second and a half, it's in the dirt by the plate. But it doesn't come drilling in a straight line to the dirt. It floated halfway through like the same trajectory you would see a fastball. But by the time you decide you're going to hit that, it's in the dirt. So this is extremely encouraging and effective. Now I see that this is actually working. And my excitement now has become tenfold. Not only I can get my fastball across looking pretty decent and accurate, I now have a knuckleball that seems to be the perfect foil that could do the opposite of what the fastball was doing. So now the strategy comes in. If I go face batter and I go in my windup, the first thing I'm going to throw is a two-seam fastball with my Jim Palmer technique, as I call it, the Jim technique. And now once they see that, they're going to see, oh man, okay, so I'm going to have to time this because he's throwing pretty darn hard. Then the second pitch is going to be either the two seam again or four seam, which is a little bit more spin that's going to cause it to give it an illusion of moving upwards opposed to side. And hopefully they don't hit this out of the park or hit it for a base hit, because the next pitch coming to you after you as a hitter start to adjust to seeing what I'm throwing you, the third pitch, of course, you guessed it, I'm going to throw them a knuckleball. And that knuckleball, hopefully it's going to have them swing so far ahead of the pitch that they're going to strike out. Or they're going to basically try their desperate, the hardest to barely get a foul ball so they can stay alive. I am excited because these are all things that I've been running through my head and training for. I'm not even going into outside of the just throwing the ball in the tunnel. We're talking about weightlifting. We're talking about rubber band exercises, isometric techniques, just overall Tai Chi. I use that. I use a lot of martial arts training in my baseball training because I know that power from the punch is equally the same power that I'm going to get to throw a fastball or hit the ball out of the park. It's coming from my feet to my hips, and then the explosion like a whack, iron chain, like Bruce Lee says. And this is just one example of refinement. And I'm writing a book, just like I wrote the book you see behind me, 365 Method. The 365 Method is a book about refinement. And this is why it inspired me to really talk about this too, is that I got a system, if you don't know how to learn to refine. The 365 book method is designed just to refine yourself and your inner self and your overall self. And then you can apply this technique to anything you want. And this is something that I'm very proud of. And I'm going to add this to the screen so you can see. I put together a so-called worksheets for just to get an idea, because this was inspired by Josh Reed saying, hey, you should do a supplemental workbook with your 365 method so people can know what you do. I understand that thought. So I created something here so you can see that basically reflection, what is the inner truth surfacing for you today? How does the message apply to your current experience? Basically, what it does is it wants you to settle down, calm your mind, and basically start to reflect. reflection in regards to refinement is extremely important, because reflection is actually you taking the time out to take all the information in and then start to recognize what serves and what does not, what to keep and what to throw out. You don't have to keep everything you learn. You don't have to keep everything you use. Some things are just used one time and is one and done. Sometimes it's not. So the factor that how do you even decide what could it be and how should it be and all those things, it's very interesting that there's not one definitive way to do this. The definitive way to do anything is the way that you create to get the most out of it, the maximum. So I'll give you the second example. And by the way, before I close out on the baseball aspect of it, in my current season, I went back to the senior league 55 plus. 55 plus is way more relaxed. Nobody's throwing 90 miles per hour fastballs. You're throwing 75, you're a stud, right? So it's a little bit more leisure, and I enjoy playing ball much more in that environment than to try to go against an 18, 20-year-old. Because I'm 61. I don't need to validate myself to say, hey, I'm that competitive, so I can be a great ball player. I don't need that. I want to have a great baseball experience so I can say, hey, I play baseball and it was fun. So moving on from the baseball aspect of refinement, I can give you my second tier of the things that I've done to refine, which is my guitar playing. For most of you that know me and have heard my story and so forth on other podcasts, you'll know that I came from a family that has no musicians, no music. I came from an acting family. Nobody sang, they were actors. And then everybody else is spectators. My mother always says she can't carry a tune. And she always tried to sing My Dogs Will Run Away. And she laughs. She thinks it's funny. My dad thinks it's funny. Everybody thinks it's funny. So there's no musical talent in the household whatsoever. But I got bitten by the bug. And I also knew, too. I was getting out of the tweens. I was going into teens. And I needed to do something to be able to be attractive for the ladies. That's how I thought. That was my thinking process. So what would be attractive to the ladies? Well, electric guitar. And it was definitely beat over our heads in the 70s that if you're a rock star, you're in a rock band playing an electric guitar, girls would like you. So with that, and also being an athlete, hey, I thought that would be pretty good. So I went into the playing the guitar thing with the mindset of being a star to get girls, not really playing guitar by so means or loving music or anything like that. Even though I took bands starting from 5th grade, got into trumpet, played trumpet and then French horn for about a year and change. And then I got out of it because I didn't like the teacher. It just, if you're not going to make it fun for us, then I don't need to be here, and that's always been my assessment to her about school, because I always thought school was a big waste of time for me. They just kept on wanting me to memorize stuff that I couldn't care. I was ready to do stuff. So with the guitar thing, going into that from 7th grade summer, the 8th grade was huge. And I couldn't tune the thing. I didn't even know you're supposed to tune it. That's how bad and clueless I was. And remember, no internet, no anything instructional. Even then, when I was starting to play guitar, there was no tab guitar notation yet. That's how far back this was. So most of us who learned to play guitar, either you took a guitar lessons, you got the Mel Bay Book 1, or you took a record player and put it on, somewhere where you get the motor to stop spinning, but you can still have the amplifier on. You spin the record with your finger so you can hear the notes slowly and you can pick out the songs. And that is probably one of the best training that I've ever had, which is your ear training, listening to it. And I didn't even know ear training was a class until I went to, JC my first year for music theory. And I went, wow, they teach this. So it was really a mind blown moment, and it was eye-opening for me. So with that, how did this tie into refinement? So I will say this. The first year, had no clue what I was doing. Just absolutely no clue. My buddy showed me and played me basically Van Halen 1 in the schoolyard. And after hearing Running with the Devil, I was just like, wow, this is awesome. Then, of course, Eruption came on. I was just floored. I had no idea what this thing is. This is so far removed from the Kiss, Ted Nugent, that type of guitar playing. This just didn't even make sense. It just was so beautifully done, and it was so masterfully done that I was like, this is a guitar synthesizer. It's got to be some kind of effect. Nobody sounds like this. So that started the curiosity aspect of it. And of course, as you have a guitar in the house with an LO amplifier, playing the Kiss live records and so forth, and I'm going, I don't sound anything like these records. Why? So I thought maybe it's buying guitar amps. So I got a bigger amp. It still didn't sound right. Then I started going, well, maybe it's all the speakers. So I was cutting speakers out of old radios and stuff. My dad goes, that's not going to work. I go, why not? Just hook everything together to the positive and the negative. He goes, and I didn't understand ohmage or resistance or any of these things. I just knew I need that sound when they hit the chord, gong, that power. How do you get that sound? And I had no idea. So needless to say, after destroying everything in the house to build this thing, I blew up that amp and finally talked my mom into buying me another amp. And this amp was bigger, but it still didn't do the thing. Didn't get that sound. I just didn't understand. Oh, then a friend came over and said, you got to tune it. Tune it? What? Blew my mind. So tune my guitar. Now my guitar really sounds better, but still sounds like crap because it's Montgomery Ward, Ace Frehley, Les Paul copy type of thing. It was just terrible. So I started, Mom, I need another guitar. I need a better guitar. And then, of course, my dad, we're at the music store. This is, I think I was in 9th grade. And I'm sitting there, just pitching the hardest I can to get a new guitar. My dad said to my mom, you got him a better guitar. He's going to want a bigger amp. I can see the logic he's coming from because he's going to come home from work. Instead of quiet and being able to sit down and get ready for dinner and read his paper, he's going to get this audio sonic assault out of my bedroom. And that ain't even the worst of it yet. So anyway, I start to refine because I practiced more. The guitar was better. And this is the number one thing that every parent should know, needs to understand. Your child's potential is limited to the quality of the instrument they are practicing and playing on. If you have a child that has been taking lessons for a couple of years and you are still playing a Walmart guitar, it's not going to work. That guitar is a piece of junk. If you got a kid who's taken 2.5 years piano lessons and can start work on Beethoven and Mozart, that 76 keyboard from Costco is ran its course. It's time to get something real. And you have to remember, for a child, anybody under age of 18, 2 years is a long time in their lives. And if they're at private lessons for 2 years, then you as a parent need to respect and honor that, hey, my kid is sticking to this. And I should do whatever I possibly can to help them develop in this direction. And I don't see that from a lot of parents. I remember having arguments. No, I can't say arguments. A disagreement. I remember having disagreements on the importance of their child's music education versus the new 5.1 sound system in their man cave. Okay. I rather have the big screen in the home theater, and I know my family enjoy it, than my 12-year-old who's been playing piano since she was 8 to get a piano. Mind blowing. Absolutely mind blowing. Because there's also the other parents that always comes back that's with their 6-year-old kid going, yeah, my mom made me take piano lessons, but I quit because I whined and complained and, it was just too hard. Now I wish I would have done it. So that's why I'm here with my child. Yeah. Experience teaches you exactly the lessons that you need to learn. So let's go back to my guitar thing. After a year, I got to learn to tune my guitar. I got a friend to come over, and a friend started to show me stuff off Rush records. And this was long before Moving Pictures even came out. So Rush was still a prog, underground, if you will, type of band. It wasn't popular. Popular bands were like the Bee Gees, Kiss, that was popular. So for someone who was doing Rush, it wasn't, but it was the technical guitar driven music that was inspiring a whole generation of us to learn these riffs like Bastille Day off Caress of Steel, 2112, the entire first side. I remember that was talked about by quite a few high school guys when we meet each other or talk to each other, that was our measuring stick. Can you play the side one of 2112? And ultimately can you play Eruption by Eddie Van Halen? And interestingly, somehow, somewhere around that time, I fell in love with the guitar. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I went to the store one day in the mall. Then there was a bookstore at the Northwest Mall in Houston. And I walked in and I saw a book by Tom Wheeler, American Guitar, or the Guitar Handbook, something like that. And this thing had a cover that was replica, one of those paper wrap covers to hardbound. And it had a beautiful picture of a Gibson L5S, had a beautiful picture, I think, of Martin D35 or something. And I opened up the book. It talked about the history. It talked about the construction of the instrument. It talked about all kind of stuff. And I just fell in love. I bought that book, went home, read it from cover to cover for years in high school. I mean, I just continued to read it. I knew more about the electric guitar anatomy by the time I graduated from high school than I would say most people. Most people, even professionally, who play guitar at that time. Because you got to remember, information back in those days was either by book or by the periodicals, magazines like Guitar Player. So if you didn't study it and you didn't put efforts to it, you just wasn't going to know. And music stores, there was much more mom and pop. Guitar Center was still in California on its own, and Sam Ash was in New York on its own. So nobody has franchised any of this. And the only way to really learn anything is hands-on. So one of the things I did to understand my guitar was that I took my Stratocaster. I got a Stratocaster in my sophomore year in high school. And within probably less than a year, I took a router to it because I read April 1980 Edward Van Halen cover story. And Eddie talked about, doing experiments on his 335, cutting his Ibanez Explorer up, Destroyer, if you will, to the Shark and all that good stuff. So I had a 78, 79 Stratocaster, mint, beautiful, brand new, was bought for me for my birthday. And I proceed to cut the sucker up to be able to dump a humbucker pickup that I took out of my Les Paul that I got for my birthday. And it was a used Les Paul 72. And of course, it was one of those things that had the embossed covers and this is Gibson. It was all that. And I had no idea. So I went ahead and took all that stuff out. But I took the pickup out of the bridge and put it on my Stratocaster. And next, I had a guitar that looked and sounded like Edward Van Halen. Now, you couldn't buy any guitars like this back in those days. Back in those days, you went to the store, it was pretty much exactly the Gibsons, the Guilds, the Ovations, the Gretsch, Fender, the Rickenbacker. Once in a while, you may see a Dean. Once in a while, you may see a BC Rich. There was no avalanche of Asian guitars yet. You may see some Ibanez. The only Ibanez I remember seeing as a kid was that Ibanez PS Paul Stanley thing. And that was 1979, 80 when I saw it. And so the guitar industry was entirely different. The way we learned about guitar was different, and the music that was inspiring us was very different. But it was going on an upward trajectory on toward music that used guitar as the main voice, and especially because it was Edward Van Halen decade, if you will. Edward Van Halen opened up a floodgate that made the entire industry change. We're talking about the way they made guitars all the way to the way we play guitars. So it was very inspiring at that time. And I remember distinctively my junior year in high school, Fair Warning from Van Halen was released in March, I believe. And the first tune that came on the radio was Mean Street. And you hear that intro and you're just going, what is this? This is the new Van Halen. What is he doing now? Okay. And I remember that moment to me was a huge moment, because this is no longer just how can you learn to play 2112? How can you learn to play a song? This now becomes, how can I be that badass and become the point that set the standards for everybody? And that was inspirational for not just me, for I think a lot of guitar players I've talked with growing up. And especially now, you know, everybody in their 60s, we all talk about our formative years. And believe me, Edward Van Halen's name comes up. And it's about those defining moments that made all of us with, I love the guitar. I want to become that great on this instrument. And I want to be that great because when I go out on that stage, I want the people to be affected by the way I perform and the way I play the guitar. So this is where the practicing after school changed. Kind of give you an idea. I had jobs working for Toys R Us or Kmart in my high school's days. And this is off season because on season I was playing football. And that literally means that if I'm playing football, I don't get home till 6:37 almost. Dinner, then if you have homework, you do your homework. And then, you know, whatever TV time, and then you go to bed, 10, something like that. And by about the first half of ninth grade, freshman year, my schedule started to shift. Okay. If I didn't go to work, I come home, I'll be at home by 4, and I'm in my room playing the guitar. And I would play until dinner time, 6:37, 7:30. Then after that, I would go back into my room and play until probably around 11. I didn't go to sleep at 10 anymore. As a matter of fact, I probably was one of the few high school guys that stayed up and watched Late Night with David Letterman, because I would know all the bits and all the jokes and so forth. And everybody's like, where are you getting all this? I'm watching Letterman. Who's Letterman? Right. So I was up all the time. Then by senior year in high school, I stopped doing sports. I dedicated myself to really playing guitar. And I would map out, I learned this trick that if you were, how would you say, if you were allowed 15 absences for your semester to pass. In other words, if you missed 16 days, you were going to fail, regardless how great your grades were, something like that. And I remember going to a calendar, mapping out the days off that I wanted. And I would proceed to show it to my mom. I go, I'm taking all these days off. She goes, what do you mean? I go, I'm going to stay home and practice. And she looked at me like, what are you talking about? I go, well, you know, you're allowed. And I explained it to her. And she was like, okay. My mom didn't dissuade, didn't discourage or anything like that. She just didn't understand. It's like, okay, if that's what you want to do and you can pass high school, right? You're going to graduate with a degree or the diploma. Yes, I'll do all that. But I need these times off. So I was refining already then, because those days off, I would play easily 8 to 10 hours easily. And that sounds outrageous, but it's not. It really isn't, because of just, if you look at the pianists who become concert pianists, look at the hours they log in. And, you know, recently there was a YouTube interview with Billy Corgan of Smash Pumpkins talking with Steve Vai. And I'm sure it's recent right now. So if you guys go check that out, Steve talks about his refinement in learning guitar days. He was doing 9 hours, where Billy was going, gee, I was getting 4 and I thought it was good. If you're doing 4, you were going to be great. If you were doing 9, you were going to become unbelievable, and which is who Steve Vai is in the guitar world. And ultimately, I got to be pretty darn good, to the point where I became the youngest in every band that I joined until I was into the mid-20s. And why did that happen? That happened because of several things. Number one, I fueled my passion. I found the passion behind the reason behind the passion. And I fell in love with that instrument. And with that, I made a dedication to myself to become a master of this instrument. So I refined it. I kept on working at it. I kept on developing my techniques and skills, my years and so forth. On one opportunity in my senior year in high school, there was a group of guys who wanted to go on stage and then talent show and play the song Beat It by Michael Jackson. Except these were all guys that could play funk and make you dance. Nobody had a clue on how to play rock guitar solo that fit the Eddie Van Halen Beat It solo. Of course, here I am 2 years under my belt of just sitting in my room doing these crazy Eddie Van Halen stuff. It was perfect for me. And that was my so-called high school crowning moment for me, because of being laughed at, pointed at, oh, you're never going to play guitar, you suck, and all this, since I was, first grabbing the thing. Now I'm in front of 1,000 kids playing Beat It and doing the guitar solo. And this isn't after 20 years of tabs or anything. This was less than a year after it was released, and I had to learn the thing by spinning my records. And I will tell you straight up, I didn't play it like the way it sounded like on the record. I tried to, but I knew that I could get it to sound like Eddie Van Halen because how much I study Edward's playing. So I played very close to what it gave me, and I pulled it off, and everybody loved it. And then I proceeded to play my version of Eruption, which is, again, I can do Edward's point of view. I just can't do him note for note because, again, I don't have the patience. And two, this is one of the biggest things I learned from it. Edward Van Halen has always said, don't do my thing. You do your thing. This is where you need to be. You need to do your thing. And I've always thought, okay, I get that. And he says, it was so hard for him to be in a cover band, because in a cover band, it was just, so not psychedelic guitar, so not in your face guitar, so not, this extended drawn out solos. So he had a lot of grief from the club owners and a lot of hard time keeping gigs in his early days, in the club days, because of his playing style. But he was not willing to compromise that. And I love that about him, to the point where I went, that's my template. That's my inspiration. So I went and did that. Exactly how it played out. It fit everything that it was supposed to be. So needless to say, my senior year, I became pro guitar player, and coming out of college, went to, start teaching, start working on, refining my own education. And I will say this, as a guitar teacher for over 30 years, the biggest thing I can say, the takeaway was I learned so much music theory because I had to teach it. And I learned so many rules to break because I had to show them how to break them. And I had to show the discipline of how to organize practice so you can get the most out of your time, which made me better. So this refinement of the guitar, and now being 61, it's been going on for 40 plus years. I don't play live anymore. I don't perform. I'm not really interested in doing that because I've already done that, been there, and got the t-shirt. This is really at the point where I will sit in my house and I still put in good, hour, 2 hour here and there to play. Do I play daily? Depends. I play probably at least 5 to 6 times a week, being the shortest, probably 15 to 20 minutes, being the longest, probably 3 hours. So I still play, and it's for my own enjoyment. And this is where the artistry comes from me. If you really do care about the art, it's not about selling records and not about, being a rock star and all that good stuff, then you could just play in your room. And that's exactly what I do. I have a custom built studio in my house. I can record anytime, do anything I want. I'm not a slave to anybody. So I only create when I want to. But the great thing about this is the art of mastery of the guitar for me has reached to a summit on a level of such a greatness that I can hear anything, I can play it. I can play what I want. There's things that I hear and I go, well, no, I don't know if I can pull that off. That doesn't mean that I want to or I need to, because I'm not performing for anybody else's approval. Nobody's buying a ticket to my room. So therefore, I don't have to satisfy my audience anymore. And that to me was extremely liberating as an artist. And as a player, to develop a skill from nothing to a so-called top shelf level playing was extremely rewarding in my lifetime. And this is one of the two things. I mean, baseball is that, the so-called guitar is that. My martial arts background, I developed that in my second year in high school. So sophomore year, freshman years. Let me take that back. I was freshman going into sophomore year, spent a year to 2 years doing Taekwondo, got out of the belt system, start training with my sensei, my master, one-on-one, because I just told him, I'm interested in fighting. I'm not interested in belts. And he was cool with that. So I did that. And then I got out of it because of guitar. Then I got back into it, start training on my own. And I would build different things to train on in regards to things I can hit, like a board with ropes wrapped around, work on your knuckles and all that stuff. And I started training myself out of the Jeet book, which is Jeet is a form founded by Bruce Lee. And I did that for a good decade before I then took time off and found Paulie Zink. Paulie Zink is renowned Kung Fu master who is the master of the monkey Kung Fu style, Tai Chi Pakwa. He is well known in regards to Taoist yoga, in philosophy of centeredness, and of course, martial arts to him and to all of us in his class wasn't about fighting. It was about tradition. It was about the classical mess, as Bruce would call it. But it was also great discipline, because we had to discipline ourselves to do these forms, these postures, these stances. There is practices that we take, let's say, sessions of 5 to 6 hours at a time. And you would never get this in a commercial studio. You go to a commercial studio, your workout's about 45 minutes. Then you have a little sparring, you stretch, warm down, all that. It's an hour and a half tops, if that. For us to train for 6 hours 3 times a week was somewhat crazy, but it was good for all of us, because a lot of the guys and gals that was in my class had their own dojos, and they were training to be on a top shelf level for their students. So those 2 years plus that when I trained for Monkey Kung Fu really taught me the level of discipline that I didn't have about physical demands. You think playing guitars and getting blisters and things like that on your fingers were demanding, or you think pitching out in the hot sun is demanding. Try to do a full-on split and hold that posture for half an hour. That is, I can't even describe it until you do it. But once you do it, and you do it consistently over and over and over, then you realize that the sense of self and what we deal with in pain goes into something that we're normally not recognizing. We almost get out of ourself. We leave the shell and we become the entity of our consciousness away from the body. And yet we still come back and unite with the body. So that refinement would have never taken place if I didn't pursue it in the sense of my martial arts training. And this is, again, one of the things that you have to find passion and say, okay, I want to develop. How can I develop it? And the thing is, are you going to put effort in time to do it? The thing is, I find a lot of people quit prematurely just because it's harder than they expected. The other aspect is they like to use the excuse of, I don't have enough time. I don't have time. But you have time to go to Starbucks. You have time to watch Seinfeld. You have time to do other things. Time is relative to what you want to put into your life. Now, think about that. Don't ever make an excuse to not do something that can make something great for you just because you want to cop out. If you want to cop out, be true to yourself. I'm lazy. I don't want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Be truthful, but don't sit there and lie about it. No, I don't have time. This isn't really the thing for me because of, it just requires so much effort. Yes, it does. Anything worth it, it's going to be requiring a lot of effort. That's why it's a lifetime refinement to be master at something. Now, let me come back to this bit about mastering. And it's interesting that I've heard this from a lot of people. And I even used to say it, which is, I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. And I used to say that because that was just a saying that everybody said, because you can do so many things, man, you're just not special at one thing. So therefore, you're a jack of all trades. And I've come to recognize that is just pure BS. It's a lie that you put in your own head to keep your governor on, or to keep your so-called lens cloudy and not being able to see clearly, not being able to move into passion because this is an easier way out by not doing it. Those things. Mastery. I am jack of a lot of trades, not all trades, but I am not master of none. I am master of one. Me, myself. And the things that I'm great at could be quite a few things. So therefore, I'm not the master of one thing, direction, technique, or whatever it may be that I'm good at, whether it's be sports, music, art, writing, however. But what I am good at now, and recognize that, is that I am above a level of mediocrity. I have advanced to the level of not only good, be accepted beyond good, great. What's beyond great? Excellency, at the level of excellence and mastery. I believe I reached that on guitar. I actually reached that on my bass guitar as well about 5-6 years ago, because I finally got my 10,000 hours in that. 10,000 hours, the so-called the road to mastery. I buy into that. I believe it. If you got 10,000 hours invested into certain things, I believe you understand it and able to do that pretty well, just because of the experience and the time invested, the effort invested into it, and the reflection. Remember, the reflection that comes back from these experiences is huge key on your refinement. These are all my steps that I've learned that got me up to a point that I wrote the book, The 365 Method. Okay. Well, why did I write this book? Let me put this up for you. The reason why I wrote this book is that I realized that a lot of people desire greatness, goodness, happiness, success. But the thing is, they are not really understanding what needs to be done. So they pick certain things that they equate to success. They may model it. They may go to school for it. They may just do that one thing. And then when it falls short on the expectations, they're disappointed. They could either forge on and maybe see clearer, better days, or they drop it and call it quits and admit defeat. I realized that is probably the worst thing to do, is evaluate yourself of failure at the 1 yard line, because you put so much energy and effort to it. You didn't get your results, so you walk away from it. not recognizing how close you really are to it. So how aware are you of what's going on? The 365 method is a refinement of inner self to everything you do. Okay. And let me say this to really clarify. If you do this process of this book, 365, the way it's intended, you will dedicate one entire year, every day of the year, to yourself for some X amount of time that you're going to reflect, interact, and motivate. This is a daily requirement for you if you do the 365 method. And while that seems to be, well, who wants to do that? Well, do you want to be great? If the answer is no, then yeah, move on. Do you want to be great? The answer is, yeah, I want to be great. Okay, well, how do you want to be great? What do you want to be great in? Where do you think it starts with? I want to be great at singing. I want to be a singing star. I want to sell platinum records. Okay, where does that start from? It starts from the mindset. It starts from your commitment, your focus, yourself, your relationship between your outer self to your inner self. And if you don't understand any of this, then chances are you need to do some serious studying in regards to how successful people reach where they're at. There was a period of time back in my California days, especially during those days, I read a lot of books. And the books I read was on biographies of successful winners. And I did read the Art of the Deal. I read several books from a lot of CEOs. I read a lot of books from athletes and a lot of books from actors, musicians, coaches. And everything had a string tied to it, meaning that there's commonality to where the success of these people. And that is the mastering of self. Once they got that going on, I really do believe that was the huge key that opens up the door to the next event, the next level, the next task, the next whatever it may be. Because now you are able to reflect and recognize it. You're able to step through and make a decision confidently to do it or not do it. And then once you make a commitment, then you're savvy enough now to recognize how do I structure it to make it work for me. I've been working with so-called working out, athletics, lifting weights, training, all that, probably since I was 13 to 14 years old. My longest layoff was probably 8 months. So that shows you that the level of physical commitment that I had to myself on feeling better, on eating right, on being in the best shape. Now, of course, the feeling better is what I always look for. Eating right, well, in the rock stars days, not even close, right? Because there was definitely party, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. However, being young, I was able to make those kind of mistakes and survive it. I am not a 45-year-old still holding on to Marilyn Manson. And I'm certainly not another 60-year-old still doing crazy train and drinking light beer. Because I'm not 20. I want more out of my life experience. So I go and seek. And if you are a seeker and you are one that know that you are great at something, but not quite sure how you're mastering this something, or you are even identifying what that something is, then I would recommend find a system to develop yourself. And the 365 method is a great system if you don't have one. This is the reason why I wrote it. And I didn't really write it like, oh, I'm a great author or anything. No, I was channeled. I am a 5D shaman. The shaman moniker comes from the wisdom and experience one that oversees the overall entire village in its balance of mind, body, and spirit. I have done so much in my personal self gains, that I've destroyed myself and rebirthed myself and came back with my paradigm completely restructured when I was 29. So I'm able to relearn a lot of stuff after that, but not at a child's mentality or aptitude, but as an adult. So I have a distinct advantage learning this way because of my rebirthing. And for those who don't know, the story of rebirthing is, prior to age 29, I was very, very satanic, very dark, very evil, very, and it all became that because of the way I was structured in my belief system. I went to a personal workshop, had an epiphany through a work group and all that. And that literally, the way I could say it is, they took my hard drive and they erased and formatted all the bad stuff out of it and left me with a clean slate to learn to love and learn how to be better, learn how to reach my ultimate goals and my ultimate desires. And those things cannot be bought, in a sense. It has to be experienced. So I was very fortunate, and I thank God every day that I had the opportunity to go through this to be able to where I am today in being an influence on the podcast with Art of Mastery, as well as Miracles Online with my wife, Kat, talking about love, commitment, wedding, or marriage, and dating. These are all things that makes us better because we're looking for refinement. We're looking for greatness. Okay. So all these things is the I would say you can't shortcut. There's no shortcut to anything like this. Okay. So let me take down to this. We're almost wrapping up. I'm going to show you this real quick. Okay. And this is astrology. It says interested in astrology. Let's learn together this fall. I'm enrolling this fall into an astrology course through George H. Lewis's Academy and thought, how great would it be to have a local community to study, share insights to grow with? Whether you're simply curious about astrology, eager to deepen your understanding, or fascinated by the way the cosmic pattern weaves into our daily lives, I'd love to connect with you. If you decide to enroll, mention JSW 432 so the Academy knows that we're coming through this particular network. Now, the reason why I did this, is because I saw George on a podcast, and George's intent, George's information that he was serving out of servitude and his aptitude to sharing education and knowledge and wisdom to all of us through the podcast was mind-changing. It was so rewarding, heart fulfilled, because he talked about the authentic self, and he talked about bringing, at this time of the world where everything seems to be chaotic, what are you doing to do the authentic self, and how are you bringing it within your authentic self, the inner self? And this is what I talked about quite a bit. And if you see me on other podcasts, whether it be with Josh or anybody else, I talk about the inner self quite a bit, because I really do believe if you don't fix this inside yourself and have the confidence in that, you'll never have confidence and you'll never take steps going forward that's going to create the longevity, refinement to any techniques, skills, or so-called even career moves. You're always finding disappointments. Why is that? Because the balance isn't there. George and I really hit it off, and I put him on as a guest in our last 13th note, and I'm so glad he came on to do that. I'm going to show you a clip. Move that, and this is something that my team, Adriana, put together. It's so nice.
It's astrology, because that only came to me in the last 12 years, but it was spirituality. It was music. It was the arts. I've always been an artist. It was always about being creative and expressing something divine.
All right. So as you can see, that was a so-called snippet out of the last 13th No Art of Mastery podcast. And I wanted to people to really start to know who George H. Lewis is. He is one of our modern educators, as well as he's a very special individual that has love radiating coming out of him. He is very special, very magical, and we will definitely have more events going forward with George, as well as a few other people that within this type of circle. So I'm going to wrap this up. I hope everybody really enjoyed this episode of Refinement, because I know I only scratched the surface of it. And this is something that I would probably come on every so often and do just by myself to talk about it. I do the 365 Consciousness podcast, but I decided not to do that on the mainstream level because I thought that the 365 method is very more personal, more it's a system, a Tao, if you will. Literally, the 365 method is my Jikundo, if you will. And I want to be able to share and teach it in a way that I can help hands-on, opposed to just, yeah, let's go sell a book and, you know, everybody gets it. And then next, you know, everybody has one sitting on the bookshelf, but nobody uses it. I don't think that would be to our advantage as humanity. If I sold 10,000 books and only 500 people using it, yeah, sure, that's great. But I'd rather have 100 books and 100 people are fully invested into doing this. I'm going to tell you, this group of 100 is going to be movers and shakers. They're going to be the ones that's going to be legendary. And that's what I saw when I was putting this system together, because I came from several different systems. I have Jikundo in me. I have Tai Ching Pakwa in me. I have so many little things that build into who I am. But I can rest assured that everything that I'm bringing to you is tested and trial and proven. There is nothing that I do from a theory. I didn't go to 4 years of university to get a degree just so I can hypothesize and talk about it. I went out and lived it, fell on my face on it, and survived it, got out of it, sometimes given with a crown, sometimes didn't. But I can tell you, whatever I'm saying in the directions or the assistance or the tips and tricks and all this, all been done. I'm not going to show you how to throw a fastball if I can't do it. So therefore, I'm full confident that if you decide to join the system, the 365 method, you're going to do something great for yourself. The other aspect of it is that I'm going into learning astrology, because what George has taught me in a very short time, I cannot ignore anymore. Astrology has so much history that ties into our global human consciousness and also our history of humanity, how we're being fleeced, how we're being destroyed, as well as how we're going to triumph it and how we're going to win. It's all in the stars. And he's starting a class in October. I will be there. I hope you, if you're interested in, contact me. I'll hook you up. I'll give you the site. You can enroll. It's affordable, but it's not cheap. And like, you know, Zig Ziglar always says, good things are never cheap and cheap things are never really good. And I understand if you don't invest in yourself, you'll never take anything serious. My book isn't cheap. Hardbound book for one of these is over $600, or no, 222 bucks. And the reason behind I put that tag on it is because you need to invest into something. And if you put that kind of money to it, shame on you if you don't look at it. Okay. So there's definitely a thought process behind why I charge what I charge for the book. But again, like I said, I'm not looking to try to sell 10,000 books. I'm looking to find 100 great participants to build an incredible future with. So that's where I'm at with this. Thank you so much again, everyone, for tuning in. Mastery is something that is on all levels, on so many different things. And I'm just so grateful that I have friends that are just masters at so many levels. Yen Shen on her piano, she is just fantastic. You know, My friend Bobby Fikes, who is a multi-instrumentalist and an educator. Same thing also with Ned Evan, the guy who is a master of an instrument that nobody even knows what the heck it is. Glass fretless slide. This is just invention of his own greatness. And this is what I'm saying, that the invention of your own greatness comes from you. And for you to have greatness, you got to understand it doesn't come overnight. And if it doesn't come overnight, then what is it? It's refinement, the constant polishing of the ball. And with that, I want to thank you very much. And I will see you all on the next 13th Note podcast.